Hello, Harrington. Mr. K back here for another presentation. This will be part 1 of Woodwinds. Why? Because there's a lot of them and it takes some time and we're going to have to do it in 2 parts anyway. So yeah, Woodwinds. Here we go. So the woodwind family is a really interesting family of instruments that has a name that would imply one thing, but a reality that is different than that name. Why? Because most people think woodwinds must be made out of wood. And that's not always the case, but I'll show you why here in a moment. So what are the woodwind instruments? Woodwind instruments are generally in the shape of a cylinder or a cone. A cylinder is like a tube, like this water bottle, for the most part, is a cylinder. Or a cone is up at the top where it kind of comes to a point, 3-dimensional object. You guys learn all that in art, right? Right? They can be made out of wood, of course, or metal or plastic. And part of the reason why they can be made out of metal and plastic and still be in the woodwind family is because most of the original woodwind instruments were made out of wood. The second part of the name, winds, woodwinds, implies that the instruments are played by blowing air through an instrument. So they're usually played by blowing air across 1 or 2 reeds, we'll get to that in a moment, or a tone hole. The woodwind instruments have holes all along the body that can be covered and uncovered by fingers or by mechanical pads. I've got a woodwind instrument right here. This is a recorder. Some of you may have played this before. And the recorder has a mouthpiece, and we blow through it. It has a tone hole that the air is going across. And we change the pitch by covering or uncovering these holes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that round of applause. The first woodwind instrument that we're going to talk about is an instrument that's related to the recorder. It's called a flute. Notice how this woman is playing it off to the side. With the recorder, I blow down through it, right? And the air goes across that tone hole. Well, once the flute started to be made out of metal, it was discovered that if it was oriented this way, in other words, if the player holds it this way and blows across the hole, it would make a more beautiful and louder sound. Check out what the flute might sound like. Isn't that beautiful? That's a very famous flute solo. Let's check out another song. I don't know if you know that one. I thought it was pretty. The next instrument is related to the flute. It's called a piccolo. The piccolo is about half the size of the flute. Everything else is basically the same. It's just a lot smaller, meaning it's a lot higher. So that means that it can sound like this. If you remember John Philip Sousa, remember him? He was a composer that wrote a lot of march music, and that's one of his most famous pieces that he ever wrote, called The Stars and Stripes Forever. The next woodwind instrument is one called the clarinet. Now, the clarinet is a relatively recent instrument. It's less than 300 years old. Now, I know some of you are going, 300 years, that's a long time. But in terms of musical instruments, it's a relative newcomer. As a matter of fact, if you remember the name of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, this instrument was actually invented in his lifetime. His clarinet is generally a cylinder, much like the recorder. And it has holes along its body, just like the recorder. But the clarinet has a special feature. We play using a reed. This is the mouthpiece of the clarinet, and it has a metal band wrapped around and holding what we call a reed tight against it. Now, what is a reed? In warm coastal areas, that is, places near the ocean, we sometimes find a plant that grows called reed, and it grows up out of the ground. It's kind of like a grass, almost like bamboo. And when we cut the reed into pieces, as you can see here, it's kind of like a cylinder. I noticed that too. And then you cut it down even more and shave it very thin, you get what's called a clarinet reed. We just use the name of the plant. And that goes on the mouthpiece. And when you blow across it really fast, it creates a sound. Kind of like tight. See, I got a piece of paper here, a little Post-it, it's real thin. If I hold that tight and I blow across it, isn't that neat? Don't do that in class. Don't do that in class. I'm talking to you, Miss Manabusen's class. If you can make that work in a way that is controllable, you can get a great sound, and that's kind of the idea behind the reed. Let's hear what the clarinet may sound like. That's really tremendous, don't you think? I think I got another one here. Let me see. What a neat song. I love that kind of stuff. The clarinet family has several different instruments, as you can see here, that range in size from really little bitty to really, really large. If you decide in middle school that you want to learn how to play the clarinet, you'll usually start with that soprano clarinet that I showed you before. However, sometimes kids get to learn how to play a different clarinet, and the one that's most common is called a bass clarinet. The bass clarinet is much larger than the soprano clarinet. It plays notes that are a lot lower, and it has keys that are spread out a little bit further because, well, the holes have to be farther apart because it's a bigger instrument. Let's see what the bass clarinet might sound like. Thought you guys would love that. What do you think? Good? I'm going to have to cut this video short because, well, it's too long as it is. But I will be back next time with a couple of more woodwind instruments and to show you just how diverse and interesting this family is. I also have a special project that I was working on the other day. I might have to save that one, but you don't want to miss it, all right? I will see you next time. Take care now, y'all.